FOL has some unexpected features, some of which we are going to discuss in this final part of today's lecture. Think about the FOL sentence, every x is such that if it is f, then it is g. This sentence is true on an interpretation I if and only if everything in the domain of I that is f is also g. So put differently, for all x, if fx then gx is false only if there is an f that is not a g. Now suppose as a special case that nothing is f in the domain of quantification of I. Now in that case, it is vacuously true that all f's are g. We do not have a counterexample, we do not have an f that is not g, and so it is true that yes, every f is g. Now this may strike you as very puzzling. So consider this exchange. Claire says, all my dogs are poodles. Brock is puzzled and says, I didn't know you have any dogs. And Claire responds, well, I don't. That's why all my dogs are fluffy poodles. And Brock says, are you kidding me? So as this example illustrates, claiming that all your dogs are fluffy poodles when in fact you don't have any dogs sounds wrong. Now, this raises a problem for FOL. As we just saw, in FOL, the sentence, for all x, if fx then gx, is true when the relevant domain does not contain any f's. But in ordinary conversation, saying that all f's are g, for example, all my dogs are poodles, sounds wrong when there aren't any f's. So it looks like FOL does not do a good job at modeling English. Now, there is a solution to this puzzle. There is a defense of FOL that has to do with norms of conversation. Specifically, it has to do with so-called Gricean norms. Paul Grice was a philosopher who thought of conversations between people as a kind of cooperative exercise that is governed by norms. So we are pursuing a shared goal, namely we want to exchange information. And in order to be able to exchange information, our practice of conversation needs to be governed by certain norms that help us to make sense of what other people are saying. And Grice emphasized 4 such norms. The first norm is the maxim of quantity. Make your contribution exactly as informative as required. Meaning, when you say something, don't include irrelevant information, but also don't omit any information that may be important to your interlocutor. And the second Gricean norm is the so-called maxim of quality, according to which you should not say something which you believe is false or something for which you do not have adequate evidence. And then the third Gricean norm is the maxim of relevance, according to which you should say only things that are relevant, so don't digress. And then the final norm is the maxim of manner, according to which you should avoid obscurity and ambiguity and be brief and to the point. Now, Grice helps to solve our puzzle about FOL as follows. Compare the 2 utterances. 1, all my dogs are poodles, and 2, I don't have any dogs. Now, 1 is true in 2 possible situations, when I don't have any dogs and when I have dogs and they are poodles. Now, in contrast, 2 is true only when I don't have dogs. And in a situation when I have poodles, 2 is false. So that means that 2 is in a sense more informative than 1. 2 narrows down the situation in which I am more closely than 1 does. Now, what that means is that if I don't have any dogs, and you ask me in this situation about my dogs, The maximum of quantity requires that I say that I don't have any, because 2 is more informative than 1. And according to the maximum of quantity, I should include all the information that's relevant. Now, saying 1, all my dogs are poodles, in a situation where I don't have any dogs, sounds wrong, not because the truth conditional meaning of what I say is false, but because it violates the maximum of quantity. And that's how Grice helps us to solve the puzzle about FOL and helps to justify the way that we model English in FOL, even though some sentences that are true in FOL may sound wrong in ordinary conversation. Okay, what have we accomplished today? We have introduced a whole new formal language, FOL. And we have done that in 2 main steps. We have first talked about the syntax of FOL. In that context, we have discussed which symbols form part of FOL and how you can combine these symbols to form formulas and sentences. And then we have discussed the FOL semantics, and in that context, we have talked about interpretations and truth on an interpretation, or what it takes for an FOL sentence to be true on a given interpretation. And then finally, in the third step, we have discussed why some true quantified sentences may nevertheless sound false, despite the fact that they are true.